As I've listened to the stories of thousands of women of all ages, in all kinds of stages, through the years, I've kept their stories locked in the vault of my heart. I feel as if they've been walking around with me all through these years. They've bothered me, they've prodded me, and sometimes kept me up at night. Ultimately, they've increased my passion to reframe and reimagine the powerful positions of mother and matriarch within the family system. I'm a problem solver, so I set out to find a way to perhaps change the trajectory of this silent and sad scenario about a dynamic yet untapped source of potential and purpose sitting in our homes and churches. It is time to come to the table, Heartlifters, and unleash the power of maternal presence into the world. Welcome to Mothering for the Ages, our 2025 theme here on today's Heartlift. I'm Janelle. I am your guide here on this heartlifting journey. I invite you to grab a pen, a journal, and a cup of something really delicious. May today's conversation give you clarity, courage, and a revived sense of camaraderie. You see, you're not on this journey alone. We are unified as Heartlifters and committed to bringing change into the world, one heart at a time. Hello, Heartlifter, and welcome to this very special Holy Week presentation. To celebrate Easter in grand fashion, we have with us today someone who I've been longing and desiring to have a conversation with for quite some time. But you know what? She's right on time. We love Kairos time here. I want to welcome Aundi Kolber, licensed professional counselor and author of the best-selling book, Try Softer, A Fresh Approach to Move Us Out of Anxiety, Stress, and Survival Mode and into a life of connection and joy. Her second book, Strong Like Water, Finding the Freedom, Safety, and Compassion to Move Through Hard Things and Experience True Flourishing. And her latest book, which is such a beautiful, beautiful offering, Take What You Need, Soft Words for Hard Days. Aundi is such a beautiful, beautiful woman, wife, mother. As I said, she's a licensed professional counselor and she lives in Colorado. She specializes in trauma and, as you will hear, body-centered therapies, and she is passionate, like we are here, about the integration of faith and psychology. Aundi, thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes. And we welcome you with open arms into our heartlifting community. Aundi Kolber, goodness gracious. Seeing your face pop up on the screen just added so many years to my life. I'm so grateful to have you here. Yes, I'm, I'm not embarrassed to say I'm a fangirl. No, I love your work. Your work is succinct. Your work is clear. What you have done in 2 books, and now with this third beautiful devotional book, kind of, I like to say breath prayer book, centering prayer. A book used to help us in our meditative practices. Combining both of the books into that is just brilliant. And so thank you for your offerings. Thank you for all that goes with those offerings in your private life as a mom and a wife and a community member. So I understand the underpinnings of the author life and what people like to think it is. But behind the scenes is a different story because it's a struggle and it's hard and it's lonely and yet celebratory all at once. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I got a little teary-eyed just hearing you.
I've already
Thank
cried
you so
this
much.
morning.
Oh, thank you so much for that kindness. And yeah, it's really good to be with you.
Well, as I said before we started, I have some real strategic questions. I know you have been on so many podcasts. I've listened to not all, but most. And so I will put a lot of those in the show notes for people who want to dig deeper. For my audience this year, my listeners, We are working on mothering, focusing on the mom life, but mothering encompasses anyone who really is caregiving and nurturing. And I think that the answer to many of the problems in our culture, in the world, is that mothers need to rise. We need,
Mm,
like Deborah said in Judges, I arose a mother. And
mm,
I feel like it is time for all of us to say, I arose a mother too, whatever your community is, whatever you feel called to mother,
mm,
because
mm,
it's just the world needs some mothering.
mm,
And so, in light of that, we need
mm,
healthy. Now, I'll
mm,
throw words around that might, you might want to challenge wholehearted, emotionally sound, mentally sane,
mm,
relationally healthy, relationally whole, spiritually authentic. I just want us to become strong like water and
mm,
in the process try softer. So, how do we do this? I have really wanted to have you talk about the window of tolerance, Aundi, because I have studied, I've listened, I've learned from many people in the field of psychology, coaching, counseling, spiritual formation. But you talk about the window of tolerance like nobody else.
mm,
And you start chapter 4 in Try Softer, page 73, with a quote by one of my favorite literary pieces. And I have taught it extensively to high school students when I taught writing and literature. Nathaniel Hawthorne writes, she had not known the weight
mm,
until she felt the freedom. And we're
mm,
talking about the good old Scarlet
mm,
Letter.
mhm, mhm,
And she had not known the weight
mm,
until she felt the freedom, I think defines
mm,
my life and so many of our
mm,
lives when we have experienced childhood trauma, which you did.
mhm,
And you're
mhm,
very open about it and talk about it.
mhm,
And why that quote? I want to
mhm,
know why
mhm.
you chose that
Yeah.
quote because it says it all.
Hmm. Well, yeah, thank you for, I don't think anyone, I mean, the book's been out for almost 5.5 years. No one's ever asked me, I think, directly about that quote, which
I
so that's
love.
that's a really great insight. And I just want to say, yeah, I mean, I think all of this, just, this direction you're going with the role of mothering and even the way in which we all and I know that this is probably more geared towards women, but even in a
Hmm.
way men do the work of sometimes having to do reparative self-mothering, right? Like I
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think about that like I've had to do some of my own self-fathering and I
Yes.
also have had to do some of my own self-mothering. So really like honoring this not only as like the actual things that happen to us, but then the reparative
That's
pieces
it.
needed, like the God-given sort of divine feminine, really, like that
Yes.
honors like this need of this ability, this tenderness, right? And this type of compassion. And then also that we, even as women, have this fierceness and are really
You
made
write well
to
about it.
also embody those things. And so these beautiful energies, right, that like God
Yes.
designed us with, there's a fullness that even in God's image, there is a reflection of the fullness. So I just think
Mhm.
that's beautiful. And then you're tying it, this, thank you for what you said about the window of tolerance that has been,
Mm.
first of all, a deeply transformative topic for me, like concept. I
Hmm.
first, I always talk about that, first Dr. Dan Siegel really coined this concept.
Yep.
Um, but a lot of how I teach it has also been really braided into things like the polyvagal theory.
And you
And
do
then
it well.
thank you so much. I very directly also incorporate my experiences in therapy specifically
Hmm.
because of how much it's like I get to actually see in a
You
way
do.
that is very it feels very clear and embodied to me, the
Hmm.
way the window of tolerance plays itself out in trauma therapy.
Hmm.
um so all that to say,
Yes.
coming back to
There's
your
so
your
much though.
question, Yeah, no, but I love it. And I love how you're weaving these things together. But this particular quote, I read The Scarlet Letter in high school and it was impactful and that,
Mm.
I was obviously still quite young and thinking about a lot of
Hmm.
different ideas. But it's so common, not only for me in my own life, because I did not personally know the level of my own trauma until I became an adult.
Oh, for sure.
I
Absolutely. Right?
I was sort of the embodiment of that quote. Like I had no idea the weight I was carrying. I had no
Hmm.
idea how little
Hmm.
how little I was able to fully exhale. How there was such a lack of feeling like I could fully be myself. That
And
there was a
who is
lack.
myself, right? I mean, you say
Yeah.
that like to be
What is even
fully
that?
human
Yeah.
alive. What the heck does that even mean? I'm asking myself that at 65 and still. That's why I'm so happy you're here to really
Mhm.
help us, I guess, know the weight
Yeah.
so we can feel the freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And this particular thing, I think this is the role, and again, why it's such complex and deep work is that sometimes we come to know the weight because someone else begins to reflect back to us
Mhm.
in a way that a lot of times we never have experienced before. Like maybe, especially with like things like developmental trauma, childhood trauma,
Yes.
but even later in life, if you're having significant ruptures relationally or trauma, like this lack of being known or seen.
Yes.
And what that creates like almost like a vortex in our body where it's like
Yes.
we don't have like we're not tracking. The one of the words for that is interoception. We lack the
Yes.
ability to track with the experience of our body.
Yeah.
And this is a really common thing that happens with especially things like developmental trauma, but other types of trauma too. This is what we mean when we say that the body is literally, when Bessel van der Kolk talked
Yeah.
about keeping the score,
Boy, is
this
it.
is one of the implications that I can't literally tell the weight.
No, 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 no. And sometimes it's even physical weight. Like we
Mhm.
gain weight, right? There's
It could be,
it's spirit,
yes.
soul, body. Yes.
Yep. There's so many different ways so that I can't tell you necessarily, or someone couldn't necessarily say, hey, here's the extent of my pain, or
Mm.
here's why. They haven't probably even come close to fully making sense of what they've gone through. Or if
Yes.
they have, that narrative is lacking the fullness
Mhm.
of the reality of actually maybe what did happen
Yeah.
because in service of survival
Yes.
we often cut ourselves off we cannot help but our body instantaneously and unconsciously moves towards more of a place of
Hmm.
disconnection
Oh,
in order to keep going to function,
or
right?
numb the heck out of it. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. But we don't
yeah.
even know why we're numbing. For me, anyway,
Sure. And
have no
yeah, and
idea.
and so when we begin, and this is where this quote, captures it
Mm.
in some ways more quickly than a lot of people experience it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's not just like weight, then freedom. Sometimes it's like
Oh,
weight.
sorry. I'm so sorry. Rarely is it, right? I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
there are, God moments. God is God. God is real. We are in Holy Week.
Mhm.
Resurrection is coming. There are times where, fully in the scripture, he touches someone or the woman touches his garment and, voila. But there were 12 years up to that moment. So I think
That's
it's
right.
very rare when it
Mhm.
is miraculous, but we certainly believe in the miraculous.
Sure. Well, and
So,
Sarah Bessie uses the
mm,
term, it's been a while, but she says process miracle.
I
And
love that.
I think of a lot of therapeutic work as a process miracle.
That's
You
your next
know,
book. I like it. That's
isn't that
good.
beautiful? Yeah. Well, props to Sarah
Beautiful.
Bessie for that. But I think
Yes.
all of this work is that. And what I mean too is that we notice the weight and then often and like then it's grief.
Yes.
Then it's feeling the feelings. Then
Mm,
it's making sure we have the resources and the care. And then finally we may begin to metabolize.
love it. That's why I
And
love you.
then in that process, we begin to notice the freedom, and we begin to notice also, oh, this is how bad. This is how big. This
Hmm.
is how much was taken from me, how much I
Ooh.
didn't receive.
Mm.
Um, and often, I have a quote that I've shared many times, but it's something to the effect of saying, sometimes people think they are really, really tough. But what's
Oh.
happened is they've normalized being treated badly or being harmed.
Hmm.
And they in their mind have come to make sense of that as like, oh, I'm just really tough. I can put up with this.
Hmm.
When really what it
Buck up,
is we've
baby.
come to expect that that's the only thing I deserve.
Oh,
And this
Aundi.
is what it
Mm,
means to be tough.
that's so good. Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Sure.
I'll not interrupt, but it just leads to, okay, we will come back to the wise Nathaniel Hawthorne, who in his day,
Mm.
understanding so much about that psychological flexibility and all those things.
Mhm.
Yeah, you write about um, the flow of strength in Strong Like Water. I loved it because I wrote Stronger Every Day. And then a couple of years later, your book comes out Strong Like Water. And I'm like, gosh, that's really right.
Mm.
That's really right. She's so good. But you write this in Strong Like Water in chapter 9. So this wasn't where I was going, but it's perfect. Strength with integration.
Mm.
And I love E. E. Cummings. You are just, I mean, there are so many quotes in the world. And I mean, I guess being an author, I always look at the quote in the beginning of a chapter because that's typical of what we do. But you just got them right. This one says
Mm.
it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. Oh gosh, so good. In February 2019, you write in the beginning that you travel back to your hometown in the Pacific Northwest, where, I mean, girl, where I was inducted
Mm.
into my high school's Hall of Fame as the all time leading scorer for basketball. That is incredible, Andy. So it shows your, shall we say, high functioning? Can we say that? Or it just shows our
Yeah.
capacity to press on, press through.
Yeah, it was certainly one of the ways. Basketball was a resource to me. It gave
Mm,
me a venue to
yeah.
channel a lot of the fierceness and the anger that I was not allowed to really feel or show in
Yeah.
response to the abuse I was experiencing. It gave me one place where I could be really fierce and really tough.
Obviously, you
Um,
were.
I was, you know what? I was a pretty dang good basketball player. And
Obviously.
I,
I love it so
and it was, and
much.
I mean, it was a beautiful part of, in some ways, it was a beautiful part of my life. And it was, in that chapter, I go on to explain that it was also complicated
Yeah.
because
Go
it
ahead,
was
go
also
there.
wrapped up in my trauma.
Mhm.
And I came to, there were parts of it that also became there were parts of it that I've had to really process and metabolize and heal because it also became sort of like one of the ways that I got maybe some of my attachment needs met, but not in ways
Yes,
that were always actually fully healthy. It was like,
correct.
hey, look how impressive I am.
I know.
And it was sort of
Yeah.
like,
Mm,
what I really wanted was to simply belong and
I
just to be
know.
able to have connection. But, in things like sports, it's like essentially you're as good as your last game. It
Correct.
is, it's very fragile, right? Like you have to be amazing all the time to maintain
Mhm.
whatever it is that you are getting from that. And so it was very
Yeah.
flimsy in that respect. Even
Like
though I
that
was
word.
very good, I was very talented,
Hmm.
but that's why in my adulthood it's become a deep value to me to say I work from love.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here. I work from love. That's my home and that's my identity. And if I find myself working for love, I have to get curious about why that is. Why don't I
Okay.
feel safe? Why do I feel the need to hustle or prove? Or what's coming
Strive.
up for me that
Hmm.
it feels necessary to do that?
Yeah.
And so in my childhood, in my teen years, basketball was this important, complicated
Hmm.
space for me, that ultimately I have been able to almost return to and almost reclaim that fierceness. But for a long while, it was so connected to my trauma
Hmm.
that I was afraid. I
That's
felt afraid to connect to the fierceness that I
yeah.
once embodied.
That's what I wanted to get to because I get that. So for me, it was dance. It was twirl and
Mhm.
dance, and then became pageant thing, performance, wanting to be Miss America, all of that. Okay. So it was for love, for sure. Right.
Mhm.
And I love how you frame that, which you frame so well to work from love. And that really, I think we need to take a pause if this is resonating in you like it's resonating in me, heart lifters, maybe pause here and read through chapter 9 in Strong Like Water and work on that, think about that, do some heart work because I think okay, what I would love to know is two things. I wanted to ask you to explain metabolize, but I think that I mean, maybe if you can just do that quickly, because you're
Yeah,
saying that a
yeah,
lot. And I just want to make sure that
sure.
this is my year to really give language to all my heart lifters so they can go, oh, that's what I'm doing. Because I know in my healing journey, I haven't had the words. I didn't know the words. It's probably why I went back and got my master's in counseling at 50 because I was just frustrated as an author because women were hurting. And then it was like, I don't know what these
Mm.
things are and I want to know what they're called and I want to know why I have it. And so, what does it mean then to metabolize when you keep saying that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, great question. So metabolize, what I'm meaning by that is it's almost like a fuller, I believe, more accurate definition of what we mean when we say we process
Yeah.
something. And what I mean from like, because my one of my main specialties is body-centered therapy. And so essentially what I'm
Ah,
saying is that when we're in that window of tolerance, when we have access to the range of arousal in which we can feel our feelings, part of what's happening is that some really important parts of our nervous system, and particularly our brain, so like our prefrontal cortex,
right.
is online. And
Yes.
when we begin to get activated because we feel unsafe from a real or perceived threat, or like let's say we are going through trauma or we are re-remembering or re-experiencing trauma,
Yeah,
that prefrontal cortex goes offline.
it does.
The implications of that is that some of the processes of our body that allow us to essentially fully feel what needs to be felt, what to fully essentially like almost like food needs to be digested in our
Yes.
bodies.
Yes.
Metabolizing is like digesting an experience, and
Hmm.
our body can, if it's digested properly, then take that experience, and some parts of it will go to long-term memory and other
Hmm.
parts will essentially be discarded.
Yes.
So when that doesn't happen,
Hmm.
that is what potentially creates a traumatic experience,
Yeah.
because that thing that was overwhelming to the nervous system remains fragmented in the nervous system, and
Mhm.
it's not stored in the same way as long-term memory,
No.
which means when something
Hmm.
sort of triggers or activates a re-experiencing, like maybe we smell something that reminds us or we
Yes.
see something,
Or we're in a
our
space, a room where
we're
something
in a
happened.
space.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it can be lots of things. It could be
It
an
sure can.
emotion. And I'm saying this, I want people to know there's a lot of nuance. I'm
Oh,
really
yes. You
making
got
this
to
concise.
got to read the book.
But essentially, when those things happen, that is like when it might get re-experienced in our body, all the sensations, all the things that happened when the event that was disturbing first happened.
Right.
And so that's like the consequences of an experience not, and especially a disturbing experience,
Yes.
not getting metabolized. So
Right.
as humans, we really want to aim as much as we're able. We're never going to do it perfectly. We're
No.
always going to have unfinishedness. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Hmm.
But we want to create environments and even environments in ourselves, like the hospitality in
I
ourselves.
think it's the biggest place. And that's why I love your body therapy because, I mean, for me anyway, I can do the mind, the heart, and all of that, but it's still, I gotta metabolize it in my body.
That's
Like,
right.
I have to make
The
peace with it
body
there.
is really the place, the sort of the foundational place in which this occurs.
Hmm.
Right. And so without the body, there can be no full healing because
Correct.
we can't think or pray or hustle our way
Hmm.
out of trauma or out of
Oh,
disturbing experiences. And so
no.
that metabolization really is essentially the functions, the mechanisms of our body being online, that we have enough support and safety to
Hmm.
feel what needs to be felt, to experience what needs to be experienced. And then we are ultimately able, sometimes we have to, this
Oh,
is from Peter Levine's work, but
yes.
we might have to like move some energy through. Like you might need to go on a
Dance,
walk
move,
or
right.
dance, or
Yeah.
you may need to actually even, you may feel compelled to set a boundary because you process it. You might be like, oh, that actually was not good with me. And
Hmm.
for that thing to feel complete, you might be like, hey, so and so, I'm really not comfortable with how that went. And I just wanted
Hmm.
you to know that in the future, I'd really like for us to handle that differently. Right.
It's
So
beautiful.
all of these ways are sort of, and this is kind of where I ultimately go in Strong Like Water,
Hmm.
is that we ultimately are talking about that whole flow of strength is ultimately about metabolization. I mean,
Okay.
really, that's what we're
That makes
talking
sense
about,
now. Yep.
is the ability for our body to move through
Yes. I
what is
think
in
you,
front of us.
yes. Let me get this little chart. So on
Mhm.
page 19 on my Kindle, anyway, not sure that
Mhm.
is the same as in the paperback. You have this flow of strength.
Mhm.
And so you're just going to have to look at it for yourself, but hopefully, Aundi, you can help us see it in our mind's eye. You go from situational strength to transitional strength to integrated strength. And
Mhm.
I mean, that made me weep today when I went over it again. You just say, what if our innate ability to survive distressing, overwhelming, or traumatic experience is strength? Here's the shift, right? But so are tenderness, compassion, feeling our feelings, and learning to rest. What if it's not a question of either or, but instead both and? It's not binary. This, my dear reader, you write, is what brought me to conceptualize the flow of strength. So here's another big word,
Yeah.
conceptualize, which I wanted to ask you
Mhm.
about. But
Mhm.
before we get there, I wrote this down. Can you explain to us, Auntie, as you were just saying, if something activates our nervous system, right? If we get triggered, if we get
Mhm.
activated, whether it's a
Mhm.
smell or being in the same space where the trauma happened, you write, there is a particular order in which our bodies respond based on attachment, which we talk a lot about. My heart lifters are very well
Mhm.
attuned to that. Physiology, which is you're telling us our body, and then life experiences. How do we create a new framework? And the even more beautiful question that you brought to us, oh my goodness, was how do I see God in the window? How do I see
Mhm.
God in my window of tolerance? How do I expand this? And I
Mhm.
think, that's
Mhm.
what I love about the flow, pun intended, of
Mhm.
your books, because, Try Softer is helping us with the compassion and so many other things in our window of tolerance, but then we can flow in the strength of it once we learn how to do that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
12
Well,
questions in one.
yeah. No, I'll try. I love it. I
Sorry.
mean, I so appreciate
Mm.
your excitement and just I it's an honor to hear how you
Mm.
resonate. So that's beautiful. And yeah, let me say just a couple things about that.
Okay.
The first thing is that in a way I wrote Strong Like Water because, well, it's like a lot of people were like, try softer and then strong like water. Like it's almost like, wait, you're writing about strength now?
Yes.
And what has been, and it was exactly the book I'm so glad I wrote that book, because what I wanted to do and what I was seeing in folks is it's really common, I think, especially when you've read Try Softer, you're like, okay, now I'm just going to be so gentle with myself and I'm going to just be so compassionate. And first of all, that's beautiful. I
Yeah.
hope that happens, right?
Yes.
But what I found sometimes, some of the language I was sometimes hearing, but it also was connected to my own story, is
Hmm.
this feeling of like, if I'm not doing that perfectly, if I'm ever white knuckling,
White knuckling. There it is.
like almost like then I'm maybe bad or I'm failing. If I'm leaving my window of tolerance, maybe that's some
Hmm.
sort of failure.
Hmm.
And the reason I felt like Strong Like Water was so important to write was to say, oh no, no,
Yeah.
it's all strength.
It's all strength. That's right. That's
And
all.
I'm not
I love it.
I'm not
Hmm.
saying that everything that we do
Hmm.
when we're out of our window of tolerance is like the thing we always want to be doing, right? Because sometimes we
Hmm.
act really outside of like our values, or sometimes we do things and we're like, why did I do that? Right.
Yes.
So this is not me excusing things like particularly like it's like not okay to cause harm to things like that. That's
No.
not okay.
No.
But what we can come to understand is that if we truly believe that God designed our bodies to survive, if our
Yes.
bodies are literally, our nervous system is always working to keep us safe. And I mean always.
Always.
I mean always,
Yes.
not just when we've like finished something traumatic, but also 5 years after, when the
Hmm.
trauma has ended, but it doesn't feel like it's ended.
Yeah. When does it end? I can
Right.
hear
And this
the
is,
echoes like, please let
yeah.
me
Yeah.
feel strength. Let me really feel, freedom. Right.
Yeah. But this is why I want to connect these ideas, because
Mhm.
that's what I
Yes.
believe. I mean, that's what Strong Like Water, that's the trajectory, is
Yeah.
that it's holding the compassion. It's holding the honoring. It's not using shame or
No.
self-hate as the motivation
Hmm.
for why we heal.
Hmm.
Again, we work from love.
We work
You
from
can't be
love.
more valuable than you are right now. There's no amount of healing or striving or goal setting that could make you more valuable than you are.
That's
That
the
is the
biggest work,
truth.
isn't it? That, would you
It's deep
say, was your
work.
greater work? Was your really accepting the love of
It's
God, the deep, deep love?
it's a huge part of it, but I
Hmm.
see it as an ebb and a flow, because
Yes.
as we come to heal, we come to more deeply embody. But
Yeah.
this is where these things are connected, is that
Hmm.
try softer is it's almost like people are like, so how do I, for example, expand my window of tolerance?
Yeah.
And what I would say is that the flow of strength is that key.
Hmm.
Because when our body experiences what I call compassionate resources, which is various cues of safety and glimmers and goodness and
Glimmers.
withness and God's care for us and relational care from others, all that is good,
Yeah.
right? When that is experienced by our body, what begins to happen is we move along that flow of strength, which is happening concurrently with that's essentially that work that allows that window of tolerance to expand.
Yes. Yes. It's holding
Because,
them both, right? Like you say, it's just constant synergy. And then is it
yes.
safe to say, taking that moment when you are beginning? I mean, I've been there with so many clients where all of a sudden, you, I mean, one particular woman just sat back, put her hands
Mm.
down, and everything in her relaxed. And she goes, I don't know what this feeling is. I don't know what it is. What am I feeling? I don't know what this is. And it made her so anxious.
Mm.
And I said, I think it's peace. I think
Hmm.
it's freedom. I think you've just got a taste, like a
Hmm.
on the tip of your tongue. And I've had
Hmm.
those moments where you do, like Nathaniel Hawthorne said, all of a sudden you didn't recognize the weight you were carrying until you put the weight down. So a lot of the exercise, like I used to
Yeah.
put bricks in a suitcase on my front porch because I work
Hmm.
out of my home and have that person pick it up and bring it into the office,
Hmm.
and it's like that was heavy. But when you put it down,
Hmm. Hmm.
what did you
Hmm.
feel? Because you don't know. So I think what you're saying is to celebrate perhaps the moment where
Yeah.
all that synergy comes and you feel something that might you never felt before that is like, what is this? And this feels really good. And I'm laughing a lot more.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I think that absolutely celebration can be a really big part of it. And here's what I'll say though, is that
okay.
depending on someone's history,
Yes.
we're gonna need to pace this in a way that feels
Pace.
doable to our body. So for some
Yeah.
people, and this is gonna
It's
maybe
good.
sound kind of funny to some of your listeners, for some people, they are again so used to the weight
Yes.
that the thought of putting down the weight is triggering,
Yes. Thank you.
right?
Oh, yes.
Let
Yes.
let alone actually putting it down.
Right.
So here's what I want to say to those listeners, because some
Okay.
people are going to be like, yep, I can do it and I can put it down and I'm celebrating it. And you know what?
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's
Right.
great. But part of this work is the attunement to say, but for those whose pain is really complicated. I think of
Yeah.
it like a ball of string that's like,
Yeah.
you want to untangle the string,
It
but
could be
you don't
heredity,
just
epigenetics too, like when trauma is locked in the family system.
there can
Yes.
be many dynamics.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there's so many different dynamics. And then not to
Yeah.
mention what could be happening in your life currently. There can
Yeah.
also be systemic issues that are making it harder. Like maybe you don't have access to all the things you need, to the support you need, or to the food you need, or I mean, there's so many
So
things.
good.
So I, for those people, and this is why I write the books the way that I do,
Mm.
is to say, I kind of think of it like I try to make lots of different on ramps and
Yeah.
lots of different exit ramps to say, I want the reader, I want the person to be listening to what is actually working for them.
Hmm.
Because what can happen
Hmm.
is if we try to move too quick, if we
Yeah.
try to move to celebration or even sometimes safety. Now,
Yeah.
hear me say, safety really matters. But when all you have known is unsafety,
Yes. Fear. Yes.
sometimes
Anxiety. Right.
we have to actually start with things like neutrality first.
Yes.
Maybe
Yes.
we're not ready for the full meal deal,
Right.
rich
Can't eat dessert
cake.
first. Right.
Yeah, we're like, actually, could I just maybe start with like a few veggies? Could that like, can
What
I
does
just
that look
start? Let me
like?
just
Yeah.
see.
What does that
Right.
look
And
like?
so, yeah, so this is where I like to give people a lot of freedom. And this is where the body centered piece matters
Hmm.
because our body will be one of the indicators
Hmm. Mm. Say
of
more.
our pace and our window of tolerance, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like, let me just give you an example. There are
Please.
lots of folks who I think, they are like so excited about these concepts.
Hmm.
But as they get into the practicalities of it, they're like, my mind wants this.
Hmm.
But when I try to do X, whatever that is, maybe it's like a meditation, maybe it's a whatever, they're like, I can't.
No, their body won't let
I
them.
just dread it. Yeah, like
Yes.
I end up missing it. I push it off. And here's the thing is that this is where people start to feel like, I guess I'm just bad.
Yep. Can't do that
I guess
either.
I'm
There's the
broken.
shame. I'm
Yep,
broken.
there's the
Right.
shame, right?
Mhm.
And this is why I say things like we also
Yeah.
cannot white knuckle our way into healing.
Oh, it's so hard, Aundi. It's so
It
complicated.
it is, but this is why it is, and I want to honor that.
I know.
But even if all that someone can do today is to
There we go.
say,
Hmm.
you know what? this is like, I understand that my body has been doing all that it can to keep me safe. And maybe I don't fully understand every part of this, but
Hmm.
like I'm noticing this level of resistance.
Yeah.
Maybe I could just even have like compassion for the fact that I feel that much resistance. Or if
Yeah.
compassion is too hard, maybe it's just like I'm just accepting this reality that this is something I really want to do. And something about that feels a little bit too big. And I'm
Hmm.
curious, like, is there one tiny step in that direction I could make?
That's what we were at. Like, how do I stick out of my window? How do I make someone has just been triggered? Someone is just back in a space or a smell or, a
That's
touch or
right.
something. Okay. So this isn't a move in these steps either. It isn't that. None of your books are due A through Z and you'll be great.
Yeah.
But what is that one first movement? If it's not, go meditate. If it's not, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to acknowledge that this is not going to be true for everybody
No, it's
listening,
not. It depends
right?
on you. Yes, yes,
Yep.
yes.
And I think one of the things that probably makes my work a little bit unique than what has often been out in the world
Mhm.
is that I like to be mindful of the people. I mean, I think of probably Jesus would be thinking about the most on the margin, right? Like the
Mhm.
ones who like, they're
Yes,
like, this is not accessible to me.
correct.
And even what I'm saying, like not that I'm doing it perfectly, but what I would say is that understanding, that okay, let's say you are a person where you're like, some of those things sound great, but that just is too much for me. Like it's just I
Yes.
can't even
I
like
can't
the
even.
thought of yeah, like the thought of like getting up every morning and doing centering prayer or like the thought of
Yes. All the
journaling
things.
every day or
Yes.
right, like they're just like sorry, no.
Sorry, not a writer. No, sorry,
Yeah.
don't like the pen. No, yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
what I would actually invite folks to consider, I mean, some of these maybe people have even heard of. A real simple one that I talk about a lot is there are various forms of what I would call grounding. Or
Yes, I
that's a
love
form
me some
of,
grounding.
yeah, grounding. So, here's why I
Mm.
talk about grounding a lot. And this is because one of the things that happens when our body gets really activated or triggered
Hmm.
is that we are losing most of that is happening in the right hemisphere of our brain. And
Mm.
when that happens, the right hemisphere of our brain cannot tell the difference between past and present. That
Wow.
means if
Mm.
you are getting triggered around something that was really yucky, like whatever that
Yes.
means for you,
Scary. Right.
hard, scary,
Hard.
shaming, oppressive,
Shaming. Right. Your
whatever the thing
face. I know our
was,
faces are like, raw.
whatever that thing was for you, if that's feeling like you're re-experiencing that in the present,
Mm,
that is first of all, that's a lot.
a lot.
That's a lot. And our body, again, we can't white knuckle into like simply
Get
living
better.
differently. That's
Stop it.
right.
You write so much about, and I love Tiffany's story in here. I just love so many stories. I love your own story, getting back to your basketball story,
Mm.
going back to the hometown, like wrestling so much with just be fierce here. Like my mom was one of the first women Marines. So hello, she was a badass. So there's no other word. And so I can do hospital corners. I can buck up. I know how to do it. It's like
Yeah.
buck up,
Yeah.
baby. But that's why I love that chapter so much. I love that
Mm.
you're saying, integrated strength is the greatest strength. So that's what you're saying here. It's not like in that moment, go, come on, girl, buck up. You got
That's
this.
right.
You're done your work. That's a
Yeah.
really hard voice in that brain. That's not what you're saying. That's what you mean by
Yeah.
white knuckling. You're not like,
Yeah.
don't
I
pull
mean,
yourself up by the bootstraps.
yeah, I mean like anything that's rooted in shame. So that's going to
Yeah.
sound different for different people.
Correct.
Like, right? And so I think what I would say is like whatever that voice is that makes you feel like if I can't get myself out of this,
Hmm.
then I am bad,
Absolutely. You're
right?
spot on. Yes.
So
I'm
here, so
useless.
one
Yeah.
of the things that I like to encourage people to do in a version of grounding is essentially it's like we're basically orienting ourselves to the here and now. That's what grounding is doing. We're working to communicate from a sensory perspective to our body, like essentially here's what's true now. Because
So good.
oftentimes the present, not always, but often, the
Mhm.
present is actually safe. is
Yeah.
safe. And
Yes.
so it's like, for me, I'm like, even there's a simple practice called I am aware. And I might just go around my room and be like, I am aware
Okay. Got it.
of the weight of my glass,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I am aware of the clarity of the water.
Yeah.
I am aware of the light
Mm-hmm.
coming through my room, this early morning light.
Beautiful.
I am aware that the temperature is pretty neutral in this room.
Mm-hmm.
I am aware of the blue on this pen,
Oh,
right?
against the white door. Yeah.
Against the
Beautiful
white door.
white
Yeah.
doors. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So what we're doing here, and I just did that was a really short
It's
example, but
beautiful.
what I would encourage folks to do is we're zooming in on the present
Yeah.
and we're getting really detailed and we're trying to use our five senses. So you could,
Always.
in my Trisofter guided journey, which is like the companion book to
Yes.
Trisofter, I have something called the Trisofter Toolbox. And essentially it's like using our five senses and using things that are comforting to our five senses.
Mm-hmm.
And when we feel like we're having a hard time, we might go to that toolbox and be like, okay, here's my, maybe it's a cozy blanket. Maybe it's my
Puppy.
bright colors. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
it could be a puppy, could be some essential oils that are really soothing to
Got the
me.
diffuser on. Yes.
Yep. So what we're doing is we can't always predict if we will get triggered or not.
Rarely, right? Yeah. I think
Yeah.
they're usually very surprising.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
sometimes, if you go, like every time I
Sure.
go to
If you're
this
going to go,
person's house. Yeah.
yes. Yes.
But what we can do is begin to create plans and ways to say, here's what I'm going to do when I'm beginning to leave that window.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I want to put together too is that is helping people travel the flow of strength. When we
Yes.
use those resources, we begin to move along that flow of strength into at least that transitional strength, which is where the prefrontal cortex
Prefrontal.
begins to come online.
Nice.
The metabolizing begins to be restored.
Hmm.
More of our resources are available to us. And
Yeah.
we have better capacity, first of all, to lessen the potential harm of what we're experiencing.
Hmm.
And also, we get to think and move and be and experience things from a fuller place
Hmm.
because we are, earlier you had talked about God in the window. And I
Yeah.
think part of this is like, I think of we begin to see reality more accurately, including God.
Oh, Aundi, we could go on for days on just that. It
Yeah.
isn't that I've had the beautiful Trevor Hudson. I mean, just he just said so much about the picture we have of God, and
Mm,
it's just stuck with me forever. And I think, yeah, we got to get our picture of God right. We have to,
mm,
or, I mean, my father was an alcoholic. So, hello, I mean, like you said,
mhm.
we have to reparent, we have to remother, we have to refather. And so,
Yeah.
yes, I think it is most definitely what's the word? Like metabolizing our picture of God? Like,
Yeah, well, I
just,
think both, right?
yeah,
Like it's not only the metabolizing of what was maybe harmful about God,
yeah,
but hopefully also repairing and looking for
yeah.
reparative experiences, and
Yes.
maybe reparative people, right? And
Oh, most
reparative,
definitely. Hmm.
maybe theology, reparative literature, reparative church experiences,
Gosh.
reparative God with us in this moment,
Yeah.
right? Like
So good, Andy.
one
Hmm.
of my deep prayers, especially this last 5 years, has been to say, God, give me eyes to see the way you're already here. You're
Mm,
here. I cannot make you more here than you already are, right?
mm,
And I think about for me and for anybody who's thinking about, oh man, I just can't figure out why I just can't see God, whatever. I
mhm.
want to just offer that, one of my favorite verses, is from Romans where Paul talks about like, I am convinced that that there is no thing, no thing, including trauma, including any of the shenanigans that happen in this life that can separate. us. Right. So here's the thing is that this is not about creating, like getting something to come. It's here.
It's already here.
It's here and it's ours and it's available. And there is compassion available, right? This is
Yeah.
where it's like we can trust that as we continue to come more in alignment with reality,
Yeah.
that, I love that verse because it's such an
Mm,
attachment truth
it's
of that
beautiful.
there is no thing.
No thing that can separate us. Oh my goodness gracious. Yes. And I am convinced, he
That's
says.
right. That's right.
So is it safe to say that I'm in this triggered space? I know something that's worked for me. You tell me if it's yay or nay or whatever goes for you. But you did it a few minutes ago. You subconsciously just put your hand right over your heart. You just
Mm-hmm.
did it subconsciously. I wonder if that's something that you have done to help you ground. And in those
Mm-hmm.
moments, I'll just do that and I just feel my feet or my knees or whatever. If I'm down on my knees or if my feet or wherever I'm at, I just will put my hand over my heart and the line at store in the store and just go, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, now it's making me want to transform it into, God, I know you're here because I know I do. And the key there is know, K-N-O-W, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Well, and sometimes the prayer is like, help
yeah,
me
there we go.
come to know.
There you go. Yeah, mine was first initially was just God help me. Just
Yeah, and that's okay. And just know that you get to please design this in the way that feels good and
yeah,
supportive to you. And to answer
perfect.
your question, absolutely. I am always like I pretty
You
much
just
almost
did. Yeah, I
live with
loved
my
it.
hands here.
It's the best.
And I do that constantly. I also you can't see it here, but I also do often my
Your
tummy.
solar.
I'll do
Yeah.
my
Hmm.
tummy and then I'll do my chest. But
Yeah.
I also often invite folks, and it's not, and I want again, the caveat is not immediately always a resource to everyone. But
No.
sometimes finding other, maybe it's for some people, it's placing a hand behind their
Hmm.
neck
Yeah.
and feeling that support.
Hmm.
Sometimes I have clients who enjoy, a little bit of a self hug.
Hmm. Yeah. I
Um,
rock. For sure.
yep,
I
I
was
do a
rocking.
lot. I do a lot of swaying. I do a
Yeah.
lot of, and what we're doing, and again, this is gonna
Oh,
look different for different
it
people as
will.
you
Right.
continue to, I think of it like you get to build your toolbox.
I love it.
This is your tool belt
Makes you feel safe.
to do the work that it's like your repair tool belt.
It's perfect.
And or whatever language feels good, but I think it's
Yeah.
that way to say when there has been great harm,
Yeah.
we are working to provide and create and be open to great repair.
Well, that is the perfect place to stop, which I
Hmm.
don't want to do. I just have one little tiny little thing, if you don't mind, and then I have to let
Mhm.
you go. You write about the cost of being a certain kind of strong, which is like integrating your fierceness with your softness, which is, I've said, integrating tough love and tender love in my own being. I love
Hmm.
that because when I do get fierce and I feel my truest self, I back down because it's always gotten me in trouble. So that
Hmm.
really resonated and more than ever in my life. And I have a lot of women in my community that are in my phase of life that want to feel fierce. And I think it's a call to be fierce
Yeah.
and not back down from that fierceness. Know how to contextualize it, would you say, or
Yeah.
conceptualize it? But you do right. You write trauma decontextualized in a person looks like personality.
Hmm.
Trauma decontextualized in a family looks like family traits.
Hmm.
Trauma in a people looks like culture. That's a quote from Resmaa Menakem. Once again, your
Mhm.
quotes. Holy cow.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to, and I think maybe you've already answered it, but make sure I cover my bases about being adaptive and how do we
Mhm.
conceptualize strength then in moving forward to integrate strength and be women who are imaging Deborah in the sense that I arose a mother.
Mm,
When
mhm.
I feel like when she sang that, it gives me chills. It makes me go,
Mm.
I talk to her all the time, like, Deborah, give it to me,
I love it. I love it.
Come
Oh, I
on.
love it. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for that naming that quote. I really
Ah,
respect Resma's work and his work. He's done a lot of work around racial trauma, but I think also that quote is just it's like it speaks to a lot of the fullness of how trauma affects.
so how do
Hmm.
we do this? Conceptualize strength, integrate it.
Yeah.
That $1 million question. I know you don't have, just go do this and you'll be great. But as we close,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that this concept of strength, I think a big reason why I also wanted to write Strong Like Water specifically is because I wanted to push back specifically around our current cultural definitions of strength.
Yeah.
Because the current cultural definition is essentially like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, suppress your feelings, and just do whatever it takes, kind of. And it can be like, I think it gives way to violence very easily. I think it gives very easily over to things like bullying, but it
Yeah.
also gives way to like unhealthy forms of self-sacrifice, unhealthy forms of like emotional suppression, things like that.
Yeah.
So the way our culture currently talks about strength is bothersome to me.
Yeah.
And be not, but this is why I wanted to make sure that in this book, I wanted to include these different kinds of strength.
Yeah. It's
Because
beautiful.
basically, I think most of our cultural definition of strength is that situational strength. It's
Yeah.
essentially this life or death energy where it's rooted in this belief that it's oftentimes unresolved trauma. It's communal trauma. It's unresolved issues, that things that haven't really been dealt with in all these different spaces. And
Yeah.
then we're praising it, which gets
Right.
confusing because then people think, well, if that's how I get affirmation, I guess I'll go do
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say to folks is to begin to, I mean, there's so many different ways I
I
want to
know.
respond to this,
I
but
know.
I think the way that we can honor strength is to say what it is the capacity to meet life's challenges.
It's
That's how I
beautiful.
think of
It's
strength.
beautiful. Yes. The capacity is such a huge word. It's one of my favorite words. And so, therefore, if we've had a missing capacity, which I've just realized is a thing,
Yeah.
and now we're getting a capacity, I love that you say that, and we can actually enlarge our capacity, grow our capacity by implementing these beautiful tools in the Try Softer toolbox and in Strong Like Water and in
Yeah.
this beautiful book. Take what you need. I'm taking it. Do you have it in front of you by chance? No.
Actually do. Yes.
Can you read us out? I'm going to just make this our Easter
Mm.
meditation, quiet moment, however you want to say it. Page 54 and 55.
Yes, I'd be honored. Okay. I believe you matter. The intricacies of your life and personhood matter. They matter not only to me as a fellow image bearer, but to our world and to the God who formed you. Every time we feel the sun on our cheeks and the wind in our hair and the breath in our lungs, when we laugh at a joke or feel the embrace of people who love us, we are practicing the brave work of resurrection. In a world where there is much pain and destruction, seeing resurrection is no small thing.
Thank you, Aundi.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Oh, heart lifters, what a glorious, glorious conversation with Aundi. She has truly invited us into understanding God, His Son Jesus, and the power of the Holy Spirit in a beautiful way. I just want to close with these questions that Aundi proffers to us in her newest book, Take What You Need, Soft Words for Hard Days. This is page 48. Try softer language. If it feels like a helpful resource, take a few moments today to sit with one of the following questions. What is the gentlest thing I could do today? What words or affirmations remind me of my true self? I wonder if I could take this in smaller steps. What would help me stay in my window of tolerance? What kind of support do I need to make this happen? Whom could I reach out to if I'm feeling overwhelmed? How could I help my body feel safe right now? What part of myself needs support right now? What activity would be soothing for me when I'm feeling triggered? Is there a way I could move my body to help me feel more connected to myself? Choose one. I close with her words. You can't white-knuckle yourself into trying softer, but as you learn to gradually embrace even the hard parts of your story, the intensity of your pain will lessen, and you will move forward. To God be the glory.